Therefore, they're very much attracted by sense gratification. And they're not satisfied with their wife. They want more partners for sense gratification. And this is because they're lacking spiritual knowledge and a spiritual practice. So they cannot control their mind and their senses. The whole idea of, let's say, self control is based on the level of the mind. Uh, a person can be acting as if they have self control, but they can have a mind that's completely out of control. And eventually, if they cannot control the mind, then they engage in abominable activities. So, how to control the mind? Very good question. Number one, not to uh, see, hear, or meditate on sense gratification. Because if someone meditates on sense gratification, they won't be able to control the mind. The mind is completely out of control. So they have to avoid any of those places or things that are going to uh, put them in touch with sense gratification. Now, the example is given of in the Vedic literature, uh, and the example is seen in life. Whenever a person sees, hears, or engages in sense gratification, their mind becomes corrupted, and they can't get their mind off of sense gratification. And because of that, they're always thinking about, how they can have more material sense gratification, even though they're functioning in society. But in the back of their mind, they're always thinking about the next time they have sense gratification. And sense gratification is something that's never satisfied. Uh, so as soon as they have sense gratification, right away, again, they want to have sense gratification. So it's a very dangerous, let's say, position to be in. That is, being in the attachment to sense gratification. If we're attached to Krishna consciousness, then the mind, although normally it is restless, it becomes controlled. And that's through regulative principles of Krishna consciousness. And that control saves one from acting abominably, acting like a low-class person, always trying to take advantage of other people for sense gratification. It's very, very dangerous. And nowadays, we can see that there are many, many people that don't have control of themselves, and they're always seeking partners to engage in sense gratification, or basically, it's not seeking a partner, it's seeking victims for sense gratification. They victimize people by their selfish desire for sense gratification. And this is seen there are certain movie stars, men and women, who victimize others, who think that their, badge of success is having illicit activities with as many partners as possible. And that is like a completely false concept. But they're so corrupt and bankrupt in their spirituality that they come to the conclusion, well, the more partners I have for sense gratification, the more famous I will be. And of course, uh, these are really sick people, and very selfish people, and they're dangerous people, and we should avoid associating with them. Uh, because they can corrupt our minds by hearing about this so-called, uh, mm, let's say, intense sense gratification that they're having every day. Okay, so one can cross over the ocean with seagoing vessels. As one can cross over the ocean with seagoing vessels, one can cross the dangerous situation of the material ocean by living with a wife. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There are 4 social orders for cooperation in the endeavor for liberation from material existence. The orders of brahmacharya, or pious student life, household life with a wife, retired life, and renounced life all depend for successful advancement on the householder who lives with a wife. This cooperation is essential for the proper functioning of the institution of the 4 social orders and the 4 spiritual orders. This Vedic Varnashram system is generally known as caste system. The man who lives with a wife has a great responsibility in maintaining the members of the other social orders, the brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis, except for the grihasthas, or the householders. Everyone is supposed to be engaged in spiritual advancement of life, and therefore the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi have very little time to earn a livelihood. They therefore collect alms, meaning they beg, from the grihasthas, and thus they secure the bare necessities of life and cultivate spiritual understanding. By helping the other 3 sections of society cultivate spiritual values, the householder also makes advancements in spiritual life. Ultimately, every member of society automatically becomes spiritually advanced and easily crosses the ocean of nescience. Nescience means ignorance. Well, this is the traditional, let's say, way to have a peaceful society. What do we mean by peaceful society? A society in which people are no longer meditating all the time on sense gratification, but rather they're meditating on Krishna consciousness and how to become a good devotee and how to spread Krishna consciousness and help others on the path of Krishna consciousness. So we see becoming a good devotee, and not whether they're brahmachari, grihastha, or vanaprastha, sannyasi, is all about helping other people become Krishna conscious by showing them a good example of what it means to follow the principles of Krishna consciousness. You have 4 don'ts and 4 do's. No meat eating, gambling, sex, intoxication, and chanting Hare Krishna, hearing Vedic literature spoken about qualified devotees, and eating on prasadam, and going on Sankirtan, and preaching Krishna consciousness. So the way to control the mind and the senses, and the way to live a peaceful life is to be Krishna conscious, whether you're a brahmachari or you're a sannyasi or you're vanaprastha, or you're whatever position you're in. If you're practicing Krishna consciousness, you can have a peaceful and happy life. As soon as we deviate from the principles of Krishna consciousness, we experience anxiety and fear and confusion in our life. And in that confusion, we begin to have very, let's say, extended periods of sense gratification, and we lose control of the mind. That's why you're hearing about so much crimes that are being committed in society, because people have lost control of their mind. They can't control themselves, and they put themselves in situations where they think uh, they have to commit sinful activities in order to be happy. So, oftentimes, some, for example, sometimes some men or a woman will decide to kill their uh, partner because they found someone else that they so-called love, and to so they hire someone to kill their wife or their husband. This is in the newspapers all the time, these type of situations. And it's hard to imagine why they would do that. That's because they can't control their mind. They're not satisfied with regulated sense gratification. So they want to indulge in unlimited sense gratification. And that's not possible. I mean, they can try for it, but it's not complete, it's not possible. So they get into situations where they start thinking about killing someone. That seems to be an obstacle to their sense gratification. So, therefore, when one is trained to be a good brahmachari or brahmacharini and to follow the regulative principles and they get married in a proper way, they can have a peaceful life, because what's the whole point of these different orders of life is to control the mind and the senses and keep them always functioning in Krishna consciousness, where even if you have bad thoughts, you can control them and deny their let's say ability to influence you. So the way to do that is to avoid all bad association. Bad association puts ideas in the mind that are demoniac and lead to degradation of morality, self-control, and Krishna consciousness. So there are what we call 4 social orders for cooperation in the endeavor for liberation from material existence. What are they? Brahmachari and Vanaprastha and sannyas like that. They're meant for these different orders. For example, sannyasi, brahmachari. It's a pious student life, and then you have a pious household life with a wife, and then you have a retired life and renounced life. It all depends on successful advancement on the householder who lives with a wife. Why? Because the householders are the only position in which one can earn money and use it correctly in supporting Krishna consciousness. And the other 3 positions, brahmachari, vanaprastha, and sannyas, are not meant to be working and earning money and spending most of their time, in let's say that type of life where they're working hard to earn money, and then they should be supporting the other 3 types of devotees, the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi. Well, today that is that's the philosophy, but sometimes we see that the sannyasis have more money than the grihastas. How did that happen? Well, not all sannyasis are like that. But it happens because one is not actually practicing Krishna consciousness correctly. To become a sannyasi, you're supposed to have like a vow of poverty. That means that you receive a lot of money, but you give it away for supporting Krishna consciousness. You don't keep a big bank balance and a luxurious life. Have a lot of expensive things, and in that way, someone can say, well, if I'm going to live a renounced life, I'm going to need a lot of money, and I have a lot of things that I like, and I can buy anything I want that I like. But that's not a life of a renounced person. Life of a renounced person, they make their life very simple by eliminating all these things that they can buy and enjoy in life. They just have a few good things. And by the way, life is much better when you just have a few really good things. And so you have really good prasadam and really good friends and really good activities in Krishna consciousness. Then you don't need to have a lot of paraphernalia. You're satisfied with very, very meager paraphernalia. You don't have to have the latest car, the latest cell phone, the latest this, the latest that. You're happy with simple things. And why? Because you're satisfied in your mind and your heart by the regulated life, waking up early into Mangala Arati, and chanting, dancing. Krishna consciousness is based a lot on the chanting and dancing. So who can chant and dance? Only people who are happy. If they're always worried, they have money problems, they have family problems, they have all these different problems, they can't chant and dance because they're worried. So the Krishna conscious person who's actually following rules and regulations is not worried. And therefore, they can jump up and down in kirtans and chant loudly and be enthusiastic to hear classes and give classes, and enthusiastic about Sankirtan, enthusiastic about learning more and more every day about Krishna consciousness. And there's no limit to how much you can learn in Krishna consciousness, because Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's unlimited. So therefore, we can be educated unlimitedly in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, it's exciting. It's a great challenge to be Krishna conscious, because every day you can learn something new. And someone who attempts to keep their mind, let's say, focused on Krishna consciousness, they will learn something new every day. And it's an exciting experience. It's much more exciting than a life in what is what you would say boring, because you're doing the same thing every day. You're not learning anything new, and eventually it becomes, let's say, discouraging. You become frustrated because there's no excitement in your life. Well, the excitement comes from hearing and chanting, because by hearing and chanting about Krishna, one becomes purified. But if there's very little time for hearing and chanting, just like one time, one devotee was talking to Prabhupada and saying that he was so busy that he didn't have time for hearing and chanting. And Prabhupada said, "Are you eating?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Then you are nonsense. If you tell me that you're not eating because you're so engaged in you're not eating and sleeping because you're so engaged in doing service, then maybe I could say okay. But the fact that you're eating and sleeping and not doing your rounds, that's nonsense. So, uh, but who's going to be able to do that, you know? So therefore, it's better just to follow the regular principles, Krishna constant, not, you know, invent false narratives. Oh, I'm so busy, you know, doing this, doing that, time to chant my rounds. So Prabhupada said, okay, well, I might be able to accept that if you're not eating and sleeping. But if you're eating and sleeping and not doing your rounds, that means you're nonsense. And eating and sleeping and not doing it, that means you're nonsense. Okay, so better we just follow the regular program. Okay, so as one can cross over the ocean with seagoing vessels, one can cross the dangerous situation of the material ocean by living with a wife. Well, what danger is it talking about here? Is being talked about? Well, it's the danger of being attracted to having many different partners for sense gratification. And that is dangerous, but that's what's oftentimes glorified in you know, movies and books and in different ways. And we should understand that actually it's not something that should be glorified. It's something that should be avoided and looked upon as improper behavior for a civilized living being. So what is a civilized living being? It's one who follows the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. And what's a non-civilized living being? If they don't follow the rules and regulations of the Krishna consciousness. Therefore, they're like dangerous persons, just like in the ocean or in the forest, they're dangerous animals, or fish, or whales, and things like that. So when you're in a society where people are not controlled by rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, you're in a dangerous situation because they don't respect life. They respect they don't respect anything, and they act like animals, wild animals. Tamed animals, you know, like we have our Ram Das, is a tamed animal, right? He's not trying to bite anybody. He's not trying to, you know, commit any type of dangerous behavior with people. But animals that are wild, they're very dangerous often, and they can attack you. So that's a human being that doesn't have control of their mind and senses is like a dangerous animal that can attack you for no reason at all, and just in order to have control over people. So there have been times, you know, in ISKCON where someone becomes a very, very powerful person, and they begin to exploit other devotees for their own sense gratification. And this was more prevalent before. Now, Krishna consciousness is practiced more strictly, and you have, you know, the leaders of the movement are more, let's say, strict about following all the rules and regulations. But previously, in the younger ages of the Krishna consciousness movement, people would attain positions of power in the movement who were not able to control their own senses, let alone help others control their senses. And there were a lot of, you know, unfortunate things that were happening. It doesn't happen that much now, but before it happened a lot, and it was very discouraging when you find out that someone who's like a, you know, a sannyasi and a member of the GBC and so forth is actually a low-class person, and they engage in abominable activities. So it's very important that we have, you know, leaders who follow the regulative principles strictly and are an example for others. So, you know, you can't follow a person who does not follow rules and regulations Krishna consciousness, you become discouraged. So here it says that a man who lives with a wife has a great responsibility in maintaining the members of the other social orders, the brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasins, except for the grihastas, or the householders. Everyone is supposed to engage in spiritual advancement of life. And therefore, the brahmachari, vanaprastha, and sannyasi have very little time to earn a livelihood. So does that mean that the grihastas do not engage in spiritual activities? No, it's not what it means. It might sound like that. It says, except for the grihastas or the householders, everyone is supposed to engage in the spiritual advancement of life. And therefore, the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and sannyasis have very little time to earn a livelihood. So does that mean that the grihasta doesn't make any spiritual advancement? No. It just means that the grihasta has a bigger responsibility for the maintenance of Krishna consciousness and the devotees in Krishna consciousness, because the grihastas are earning money, and the other three types of devotees, like sannyasis and brahmacharis and vanaprasthas, they don't have time for that. They don't have time for earning a living, going to work every day, and doing all kinds of different, having all kinds of different obligations. So, but even if one is not let's say, a renounced person completely, still they can make spiritual advancement by following the regulative principles. So the regulative principles: every day we should wake up early, take a bath, come to the temple, and see the deities, and also engage in hearing classes, chanting, dancing, all these different things that are spiritual activities, and everyone can engage in them. It's not only the sannyasis that do that. Everybody in Krishna consciousness can do that and make spiritual advancement. And spiritual advancement is based on cooperative efforts, cooperative efforts. In other words, everybody helps everybody else to make spiritual advancement. They don't do things that interfere with other people's spiritual advancement. They support it. So therefore, instead of kicking people down in order to go up oneself, we kick people up instead of down. Oftentimes in the material world, you advance in life by kicking people down and you going up. But in Krishna consciousness, the devotee, the more advanced they become, the more humble they become, and the more, let's say, renounced they become. In other words, they're kicking themselves down and supporting others rather than kicking others down to get their own advancement. So this downward kicking and upward kicking, you have to think about it. What is a stronger position? Well, the stronger position is developing more and more humility and purity of thought and activity, and that is sometimes, let's say, translated as being less important than the person who seems to be a very high, person in society. So one time there was a very rich man, and he decided to go on a pilgrimage to a holy place. And there was another person who was very poor, but he also wanted to go. on pilgrimage. So the rich man had an elephant that he was able to sit on, and servants. And he's going to the holy man, sitting on this elephant, and he had all these servants serving him, very nice food and doing all kinds of things for his comfort on this pilgrimage. And there were other people that didn't have an elephant; they were just walking. They didn't have opulent food; they were just eating very, very simple food, going on the pilgrimage. And it was a long trip. And before the rich man reached the pilgrimage site, he had a heart attack and died. And the other people who were just walking, they all made it. So why did that happen? Well, because if you go on a pilgrimage, it's to not have opulent food, opulent, big elephant to sit on and so forth. It's to engage in acts of tapasya and to humble yourself, and then therefore you have a better chance of reaching the desired place of holy place, because in holy places you perform acts of renunciation, and you're controlling your eating, and you're controlling your sense gratification and so forth. But if you try and go to a holy place with all the all the things of sense gratification, you're basically acting in the wrong way. So this person who was riding an elephant, was eating opulent food, and he had all kinds of people serving him. He had a heart attack and died before he reached the holy place. And the other people who were walking and just eating very simple food, they all made it to the holy place. So we don't go to holy places to live and eat lavishly. We go there to limit all those things so that we can focus more on being a devotee and purifying ourselves. We go to holy places for purification, not for contamination. So if a person goes, like for example, there was this one person with very, very big responsibility, and because he was so, let's say, successful, his ego was out of control, and he at one point purchased a golden toilet, and then his let's say responsibilities increased a lot. So whenever he got more places that he had to be GBC, eventually he wanted the golden toilet to follow him in those places, right? And eventually, what happened was the golden toilet arrived in this place where he had more, he had recently became a GBC. But by the time of the golden toilet got there, he was thrown out of his position at GBC. So we don't really need golden toilets. What we need is a mind that is Krishna conscious and not desiring all these opulent things. Just rather just live very simply, eat simple food, and be very regulated and chant Hare Krishna purely. That's what we need. We need pure chanting or golden chanting rather than golden toilets. Okay. Okay, so uh, so the point is that if someone is a brahmachari, a vanaprastha, or sannyasi, they have very little time to earn a livelihood. They therefore collect alms from the grihasthas, and thus they secure the bare necessities of life and cultivate spiritual understanding. So that's important. That's to learn to, if you, you know, if you're not a grihastha, then you should live and be satisfied with the bare necessities of life. So you have more time and energy for spirit to cultivate spiritual understanding. Now, and that's a fact. The more you are simplifying your life in order to chant Hare Krishna nicely and go on Sankirtan, preaching, the result of that is your mind is always focused on Krishna. But if you have a more complicated life because you have family, you have obligations, you have time-sensitive things that have to be done all the time, but they're not directly related to Krishna consciousness, you don't have that same, let's say, happy and peaceful mind because you're always dealing with situations that have to be settled in a specific time, and it's a challenge to balance your life, you know, between Krishna consciousness and your I'm not going to say social life, but your life of maintaining a family. So it's more difficult when you're grihastha, and it should be more easy when you're not married and you're a brahmachari or brahmacharini, because your life is much more simple. It's not cluttered with so many responsibilities. The only the responsibilities you have then is to follow all the principles of Krishna consciousness. So, if you are a good grihastha, man or woman, and following all the principles of Krishna consciousness at the same time maintain the family, you're a hero. It's a great achievement to be able to do that. And then also, when the right time comes, you know, when the children are adults and married and so forth and established, then you should downsize significantly. And the way that you downsize is that the husband and wife together start going on a lot of pilgrimages to holy places and learning to be much more renounced and much more free of home and hearth. You know, and all the pleasures of living in a nice house and nice car, this thing and that thing. So being a pilgrim for a period of time, husband and wife going to all the different holy places and doing, you know, tapasya in those places and chanting nicely. They basically what they're doing is preparing themselves to be not attached to the big house, the big car, and the big overhead. And they live with very little gradually, so their life is much more simple, and they're not so let's say concerned about making this and so, you know, more and more money and things like that. So if you can downsize in a, you know, intelligent way, you're much happier in life. And now you have much more time for chanting Hare Krishna, dancing, and being Krishna conscious. So that's what we should aim for. Once the children are grown and married, we should downsize our material needs and increase our chanting and Krishna conscious activity. So here we have someone, usually, when you join Krishna consciousness, sometimes people are already married and then they join Krishna consciousness. But in the more, let's say, the normal thing is someone is not married, they join Krishna consciousness and they learn to have a very renounced life as a brahmachari or brahmacharini. And then all of a sudden they get married, life gets more complicated. Right? And they don't have all the freedom they had before as a celebrate, student. And then they have children, and then they have to raise the children. And this is like, 25, 30-year responsibility. And it depends how many children you have. Like my wife and I had 6 children, so it's a big responsibility, to raise them properly and get them situated in life and so forth. So but if someone follows the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness, they can go through all the different steps of life, or all the different positions that they may have in life, without becoming discouraged and without falling down. But if we're not careful about our chanting and following the principles of Krishna consciousness, then little by little we lose the enthusiasm to be Krishna conscious and eventually leave Krishna consciousness. That happens, unfortunately, it happens a lot. So we should be very, very concerned to strictly follow the principles of Krishna consciousness, which is basically, you go to sleep early, you wake up early, you chant your rounds, now that you're ready to face all the responsibilities you have in life. If you can't do that, then it's almost impossible to chant the rounds during the day. There's so many things happening. And by night, you're too tired to do anything. So then you fall behind on your rounds and you're trying to make them up, and you just can't seem to get things done that way. Either the material things you have to do or the spiritual things you have to do, because you've lost control of regulated life. So that's the worst thing to do. So we have to be very careful to be strictly regulated in our activities in the day, and make our sleep also Krishna conscious by limiting to just Prabhupada said like 6 hours. That's it. It's not this 8, 10, 12-hour sleep. So that you can only do that if you're regulated. Be careful about how much you're eating and what you're eating. Should only be prasadam, of course, but the quantity also has to, you have to be careful. You overeat and you get tired easily. So there's a lot of things we have to learn in Krishna consciousness. And if we are trained by good parents, we learn them right from the beginning of life. And as we get older, it becomes our culture to be a minimalist, and not to eat too much, not to eat too little, and not to engage in unlimited sense gratification. You limit it to what is Krishna conscious. So eating prasadam is a type of sense gratification, right? You're satisfying your senses by eating, but it's not gross sense gratification. It's spiritual pleasing of the senses up to a certain limit. So when you say pleasing of your senses, by eating and sleeping and things like that, it's all controlled by the principles of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, you don't go past the threshold from bona fide things to unbona fide things in life. There's a certain threshold, there's a certain line where now it's no longer following the principles of Krishna consciousness. Now it's sense gratification, You know, too much eating, too much sleeping, too much this, too much that. It's no longer spiritual. So, spiritual life is controlled to make spiritual advancement. And material life is planned for sense gratification. You know, so people go on vacations, they have nice cars, they buy things on credit, and they're always in association with other people who are very strongly materialistic and so forth. And there's then the way to see if one is successful or not is if they have a lot of gadgets in their life, you know, the latest watches, the latest cars, the latest this, the latest that. And then there's a competition that goes on, you know. You say, oh, this my neighbor bought this new car. I gotta have a new car. Oh, my neighbor did this or that, or this friend of mine did this. I gotta do the same thing. So we should be satisfied more about simplifying our life and eliminating too much opulence and living much more simply than increasing all those things. So at one point, if you're married, you have to increase a lot of things because you're having children, you have to take care of them and so forth. But then there's a period in your life where the children are grown and they leave the house, they get married. Now you have to downsize, you know, gradually to a very, very low level of trying to please the senses and have a minimalist life. But you can have a minimalist life even though you are married in your personal behavior. Like, for example, not just because you're married, you don't stop waking up early every day, chanting your rounds and so forth. It's not an excuse. Well, I'm married now. You know, I have to sleep more. I have to eat more. Blah blah blah. But if you've been trained properly, then you don't have to sleep more and eat more and so forth, even though you are married, because you like to be Krishna conscious. You like to chant your rounds early in the morning and so forth, and then do all your duties. So when you get married, you have to be even more regulated than when you're not married. And that way you can do all your responsibilities. So we will now and so in this purport, Canto 3, chapter 14, verse number 18, it says that except for the grihastas, for the householders, everyone is supposed to engage in spiritual advancement of life. And therefore the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and sannyasis have very little time to earn a living. Well, does that mean that grihastas can't make advancements in Krishna consciousness while they're grihastas? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that it might be a little bit more difficult for the grihastas, but whenever you remain regulated in your activities, you're able to do everything, even though you have much more responsibilities. Why? Because you control yourself by regulation of your activities, eating just enough and sleeping just enough and so forth, even though you have more responsibilities. Therefore, we have an example. It's Srila Prabhupada. He was married. He had 5 kids. He had a business. But yet, he was able to do all these things and still practice Krishna consciousness. Maybe not as easily as someone that doesn't have so many responsibilities, but still, he was able to raise those kids. He was able to maintain the family by working and still made significant spiritual advancement and maintained himself in Krishna consciousness. So it's possible to do it if we follow the examples of, acharyas. It's not that we, sometimes people say, well, I can't finish my rounds and anything, but, later on when my kids grow up and they're not at home anymore, then I'll follow everything. That's not a good policy. You have to follow everything and do everything to maintain your family. And that's possible by being highly regulated in your activities. Okay. So now go to text 19. We're almost finished though. So are there any questions or comments? And we'll stop on that verse. Question? No. Understood. Yes. All right, so no questions, then we'll.
Maharaj, this is from yesterday's lecture.
Yeah,
We were talking about how yoga, current yoga versus how spiritual differences, right? Now, when yoga came down to Western, people started cherry picking what they want.
Yes.
And I think that's also happened in spiritual texts. People want like whatever they like, they cherry pick, and maybe an association started, like, an organization started with that concept, is what I kind of.
You experienced that?
I mean, like, there are like, for example, I mean, at least I have personal experience with Brahma Kumaris. They say no meat eating, no gambling. They also restrict onion, garlic. But the way they take you to the path is completely opposite. They talk about Narayana and Lakshmi to be the highest cadre, and only people born in India are eligible to go into the next yuga, and humans will be born as humans only again. So they have certain like what
Misconception.
right. So how do you see like the harm in this, or the plus and the minus, to say?
Well, the plus, Brahma Kumars usually really put a lot of emphasis on being chaste.
Yes.
So that's one thing. But they don't really believe in Krishna. They have their own father or something, some man and woman that really consider like Brahma, And so they have, a lot of hodgepodge philosophy. It's all mixed up and everything. But they follow this principle of chastity, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But they're not actually devotees. They're what you would say, people who have made their own rules and regulations, and they're not really following Sanatana Dharma correctly. And they might be following some things, but not everything. So, all right, but the main point is that we have to follow bona fide acharyas. And who are bona fide acharyas? Those who have understood what Krishna was taught and follow exactly the same thing, not deviate. Unfortunately, Brahma Kumaris have deviated from that. And they have a certain amount of material success, and they try and follow, principles of chastity a lot, but it's a mixed philosophy. It's not pure, right? And And oftentimes, uh, the Brahma Kumaris, their marriages are, in a sense, you can tell me if this is true or not. Uh, their marriages sometimes break down because and the women sort of take over the movement, and the men are sort of like, just following but not really leading. Uh, so in a situation like that, sometimes the marriages become, let's say, stressed. Um, but I know people, if the husband just tolerates the fact that his wife is a Brahma Kumari. And then other times, the husband's really upset, but you can also break a marriage. So anyway, in Krishna consciousness, we we don't look down on people being married. We don't look down on them having children. We don't look down on them on you know uh, chanting and dancing and so forth. Let me ask you a question like that. Uh, are the Brahma Kumaris that have this chanting and dancing a lot?
No, there is no chanting.
They do dhyan.
Huh?
Dhyan.
Yeah, they
Very different.
believe in light being the ultimate.
They
So
have
meditating.
meditating the light
Yeah.
there, and they just sit there. They just meditate.
So it's it's boring basically. Yeah.
In the Wikipedia, they say they also have discourses closely connected to the Bhagavad Gita.
Discourse is what?
Connected to the Bhagavad Gita. Closely connected to the Bhagavad Gita.
Closely, that means almost but not.
Except Krishna, basically.
Yeah.
So I actually listened to one lady who came out of Brahma Kumari outside, left. And then there is an interview. I don't know whether you watched it, but her whole family, she's from Andhra Pradesh. Yeah, and they talk about how they used to be spiritually aligned. So somehow she got connected first when she was in the young age, and then her two sisters and one brother. I think all of them got connected. I think there's some fundamental principles because it's all Vedas only, so they're all attractive because they seem to teach the right thing, but they deviate the point where eventually there's no Krishna, nothing. So the founder is the incarnation, the current incarnation of that, whatever the ultimate father or ultimate person. And then, in fact, she claims that this founder's goal is to get about 16,000 gopis. So majority of the society, like once you are a certain above age, they just talk about the principles and then leave them. But then the younger ones, that's what Brahma Kumaris, they focus on the chaste girls. But then obviously, that's what she claims is that they have some other ulterior motive to serve that founder.
Founder is as a man, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. As if like and then their philosophy is also that in Satya Yuga, people were kings and something like that, or maybe they were the Devi Devatas, and then in the next they became kings, then they became something like there's a degradation finally.
They say that when they're preparing themselves for the next Satya Yuga.
Yeah, next Satya Yuga, and then if you are in this chastity now, then you will become again Devi Devatas.
Then you'll have a lot of sanskrit.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where people fall into, I guess, Maharaj.
Yeah.
And it got divided into two.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Also.
that is, yeah. So, yeah.
Maharaj, you said like this 2% they're going for the holy place, and still now that's like they go the mountain, like we had a Badrinath, Kedarnath, Yamunnath. They go with the hearts. People go with the hearts, and sometimes the hearts. Yeah, some people walk, and some horses die and just thrown out in the road. And so they're going for like, for something like holy place to get like Purna. So what they're doing, there's like Papa they're doing or Purna they're doing. Because horse is dying, they don't have properly water or something. Just have to walk, they're beating.
Well, if you go on a pilgrimage, you're supposed to, diminish your physical, let's say, your comforts and perform tapasya. But if you go, have all the, things that you have at home on the pilgrimage, then you're missing the whole point. The whole point is to basically simplify your life so you can focus more on spiritual life. Not that you get all the comforts, you take all the comforts with you on the pilgrimage. The rooms that have AC, and the food is opulent and things like that. You have to actually perform tapasya. Not that you're going on a pilgrimage with all the
Comforts.
all the comforts that you have at home. So it's to learn to control your senses and limit your sense gratification to almost nil. I mean, there is sense gratification just by eating. There's sense gratification, but it's not exorbitant. It's very, very simplified. Right? So it's very easy for people to pass the line of tapasya to doing things opulently. And actually, when you limit your eating and sleeping, you're actually living an opulent life because you have more consciousness and you have more power of controlling your mind and senses, and you have more peace. Right. So this, luxurious eating, luxurious sleeping. You know how much people spend on their bed. I mean, you sometimes they spend thousands of dollars on their bed. The bed is like it's a high tech instrument. So we have to stay away from that type of artificial opulence. The real opulence is controlling your life, your mind and senses, living very simply and having plenty of time for spiritual life, and engaging in all kinds of nice things like chanting, dancing, doing sankirtan. At the same time, maintaining your responsibilities. You find that you're able to do all these things, and it's balanced. When you have an unbalanced life where you're doing mostly just sense gratification things and very little spiritual things, then you find that your mind becomes agitated all the time. So it's important to have good association. Then you can gradually get rid of the unnecessary things and just only do the necessary things to maintain a spiritual life and a decent material life. A decent meaning it's not full of exorbitant opulence, but and how is that? Because you follow the principles of tithing. Tithing means giving money to the temple, and hopefully the temple uses it properly in helping other people become Krishna conscious. Right? So there's an obligation of the Grihasthas to support the temple and the renunciates, so that they don't have to worry about making money. They can just be focused on preaching and maintaining a very strict spiritual life. So, Hari Bol, everybody that works cooperatively makes life easy for everybody. And when people stop cooperating, it becomes very difficult for everybody. So we should all cooperate with Srila Prabhupada's teachings and make Krishna consciousness very successful so that everyone will be happy. Hari Bol. Worship Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
People who are very heavy sense gratifications, they're not happy. They act like they're happy, but they're not happy. You know, and it's not a good life. It's better to limit